Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today's episode is going to be a $50 deck tech. When I say $50, I mean that is an overall deck cost. Both shipping and commanders that are $10 or less are going to be included in that cost, but basic lands will not be. Decks on this channel are built to be fun, inexpensive, and focused. If you want to learn more about what a focused commander deck is, check out this video here. On this deck tech, I'm going to take you through its strategy, the tactics, and how this deck wins. This show and episodes like this one are possible because of viewers like you. So if you're looking for some easy ways to help support the show, make sure you like this episode and share it with friends. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Thank you to everyone who's already purchased our merchandise, it really does help support the channel. Another easy way to support this channel is by using our TCGplayer affiliate links. So make sure that you're looking for those links in the description whenever you're buying a deck or just individual cards. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Today's episode comes to you courtesy of Johnson. He's a general tier patron that's been supporting this show for over a year now. I really couldn't do this without the support of amazing patrons like Johnson. And for his personalized deck tech, he chose Doran the Siege Tower. Doran is a 0/5 Treefolk Shaman that costs black, green, white. It has each creature assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. So this is a very unique commander that can help you in multiple ways. First off, there are plenty of creatures out there that have a lot of toughness that are very easy to cast. This turns those defense-minded creatures into destructive offensive powerhouses. Secondly, this commander can really throw a wrench into your opponent's plans. A lot of those high toughness creatures aren't too useful in other decks. Because of that, your opponents probably won't be playing them, but they might be playing some creatures that have a high power and a low toughness. So this effect can turn your opponent's very powerful creatures into some very weak ones. So our strategy for this deck is very simple. We're going to get a lot of toughness onto the board and start swinging. Like I mentioned before, a lot of those high toughness creatures have a low converted mana cost. So because of that, we can get a lot onto the board and be very aggressive. And then how do we win with this deck? Well, it's very simple. We're going to further toughen up our creatures and smash some face. We're going to be running some Anthem effects, but we've also got some one-off effects that are very potent too. As with all Commander's Quarters decks, I'm going to take you through 10 different tactics that show you how the deck works and how we're going to win with it. So let's start things off with tactic number 1, Growing Trees. First up, there's Wayfarer's Bauble, which we can pay 2 to tap and sacrifice it to get a basic land into play tapped. And then there's a Tri Builder, which we can sacrifice to do the same. Up next, we've got 3 spells that can ramp us on turn 2 with Farseek, Rampant Growth, and Edge of Autumn. Farseek's going to get us a Plains or a Swamp into play tapped. And Rampant Growth and Edge of Autumn can get us any basic land into play tapped. And then we're going to be running all 3 of our signets with Selesnya, Kogari, and Orzhov. By paying 1 into them and tapping them, they add their guild's colors. And finally, we're running 2 of the Talismans with Talisman of Unity and Talisman of Resilience. Both can tap for a color, so they can tap for 1 of 2 colors, but they deal 1 damage to us. A lot of cards in this deck, including our commander, have a very low converted mana cost, so we want to ramp as early as we can. But what are some of those other creatures that we're going to be casting early? Let's go through them now in tactic number 2, Tough Enough. First up, we've got God Pharaoh's Faithful, Laguna Bay and Trailblazer, and Disowned Ancestor. Each of them are going to be 0/4s that cost 1. But again, with our commander in play, they deal combat damage with their toughness. So with this deck, they're basically 4/4s for just 1 mana, which is absolutely absurd. On top of that, God Pharaoh's Faithful can gain its life, and Disowned Ancestor can get bigger. Moving up to 2 mana, we've got Grizzled Leotau and Nyx's Fleece Ram. Each of these are essentially 5/5s in this deck, and Nyx's Fleece Ram can even gain us life. Up next at 7 toughness for 4 mana, we've got Kami Vold Stone, Looming Altasaur, and Gorm the Great. Again, essentially a 7/7 for 4 mana is a great deal. On top of that, Gorm the Great has Vigilance, and it must be blocked to Fable, and must be blocked by 2 or more creatures of Fable. So he can be a huge threat, and he can throw a wrench into our opponent's blocking. And then we've got the slightly less efficient Silklash Spider. It has 7 toughness for 5 mana, which is still a great deal. But on top of that, it has reach and pay X green green, and it deals X damage to each creature with flying. So this card is fantastic at keeping our opponent's flyers off the board. Also at 5 mana, we've got 2 creatures with 8 toughness with Rotting Mastodon and Johnny Lifestrider. And Johnny Lifestrider can even gain us life because when it enters the battlefield, we can tap any number of untapped creatures we control, and we gain 2 life for each creature tapped this way. But perhaps an even more efficiently costed creature comes with Skin Shifter. It starts off as just a 1/1 for 2 mana, but it has pay a green and choose 1. Until end of turn, Skin Shifter becomes a 4/4 Rhino and gains Trample, or until end of turn, Skin Shifter becomes a 2/2 Bird and gains Flying, or until end of turn, Skin Shifter becomes a 0/8 Plant, activate this ability only once each turn. Now, all these creatures can be huge threats when our commander's in play, but they're nowhere near the biggest threats in this deck. So let's go through those creatures now in tactic number 3, Toughest Around. First up, there's Indomitable Ancients, which has 10 toughness for 2 white. So essentially for just 4 mana, we're getting a 10/10, which is absolutely unheard of. Up next, we've got Oketra the True and Heavenly Blade Master. Oketra is a 3/6 with Double Strike and Indestructible that costs 3 and a white. Now, it can attack or block unless we control 3 other creatures, but that's not going to be a problem with this deck. And then Heavenly Blade Master is a 3/6 with Flying and Double Strike, and it costs 5 and a white. So normally these two would be attacking for a total of 6 damage, but since our commander counts on toughness instead of power, they're basically going to be swinging for 12. One creature that can deal even more damage though is Tree of Redemption. It's a 0/13 with defender that costs 3 and a green. So though it can't attack, it's still an amazing blocker with this deck. And on top of that, if we need to, we can tap it to exchange our life total with its toughness. And finally, the heaviest hitter in our deck is the Tulpa Primal Dawn. It's a 4/8 Elder Dinosaur with flying, double strike, vigilance, trample, and indestructible, and it costs 6 white. So normally this would be dealing a respectable 8 damage, but with this deck it's going to be dealing 16. Now with these huge creatures, it can be really hard for our opponents to get through and deal us damage. But we've got some ways to make it even harder for them to take us out. So it's time for us to move on to tactic number 4, Tough Life. First up, this Rostani Selesny's voice, which says, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. And then Verdant Sun's avatar does the exact same thing, but it counts itself too. Regardless, with either of these in play, we're going to be gaining a ton of life with this stack. But perhaps an even bigger way for us to pad our life total is with Ikra Chidiki. It's a 3/7 with menace that costs 3 black-green, and it has whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. So not only can this be a good threat for us, it can also get us a ton of life throughout the game. But what are some ways that we can make our creatures even more threatening? Let's tackle them now in tactic number 5. This is the Anthem. First up, there's Spider Silk Armor, which is an enchantment that gives our creatures we control +0/+1 in reach. So this not only helps us pump our creatures, but it also makes it a lot easier to defend against flyers. And 2 other ways that can help with defense are Sight of the Scale Lords and Oathsworn Giant. Sight of the Scale Lord says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, creatures you control with toughness 4 or greater get +2/+2 and gain vigilance until end of turn. This not only makes our creatures deadlier, but allows us to swing more freely with them since they're going to be back for defense too. And then Oathsworn Giant is very similar. It gives other creatures we control +0/+2 and vigilance. Now these Anthem effects are great, but we've got some cards that can be even more impactful and come out of nowhere. Bar the Door is going to give creatures we control +0/+4 until end of turn. Now normally this is used as a defensive spell, but in this deck it's a fantastic combat trick that we can use to blow opponents out. Essentially giving all of our creatures +4/+4 for just 3 mana is absurd. Some even bigger spells though come with Tower Defense and Solidarity. Each of them are going to give creatures we control +0/+5 until end of turn. Again, spells like these can easily take them by surprise and finish them off very quickly. A card that can help one of our creatures though, but in a big way, is Slagworm Armor. It's an equipment that gives equipped creature +0/+6. This is a gigantic pump effect that can make our already deadly creatures even deadlier. The amount of value that these things can provide us can be absolutely absurd, but there are other spells in this deck that can be just as valuable. So let's go through them now in tactic number 6, Value Town. First up, there's Brave the Sands, which does 2 things. It gives creatures we control vigilance, and it says each creature we control can block an additional creature each combat. This card allows us to be a lot more aggressive with our creatures. This allows us to swing out and still keep those creatures back for blocking, and it also makes our blocks even more effective. A card that makes our attacks even more effective though is Behind the Scenes. It says creatures you control have skulk, so they can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. Our creatures might have a high toughness, but they have a very low power. So this is going to allow them to get through on our opponents most of the time. But a card that can really provide an absurd amount of value in this deck is Wild Pear. It says whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, you may search your library for a creature card with the same total power and toughness and put it onto the battlefield. If you do, shuffle your library. In this deck, we've got a ton of creatures that have the exact same total power and toughness. So with this in play, every single time we cast a creature, we essentially get a second one for free. The amount of value that this can provide us in just a few turns is absurd. But outside of this kind of tutoring, we need some other ways to get to our threats. So let's go over some ways to help with that in tactic number 7, Dig Deep. First up, there's Wall of Blossoms, which when it enters the battlefield, we draw a card. And it's essentially a 4/4 defender for 2, which is a great deal. Some creatures that can draw us even more cards though are Runic Armasaur and Ulvenwald Observer. Runic Armasaur has whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature or land that isn't a mana ability, may draw a card. In a format like Commander, this can happen plenty of times throughout the game. And then Ulvenwald Observer says whenever a creature you control with toughness 4 or greater dies, draw a card. Nearly every single creature in this deck meets that requirement. Some one-shot spells that will draw some cards though are Read the Bones, Painful Truce, and Ambition's Cost. Read the Bones is going to let us scry 2, draw 2 cards, and lose 2 life. And then both Painful Truce and Ambition's Cost will draw us 3 cards for 3 life. Next up, there's Harmonize, which draws us 3 cards and we don't lose any life. And finally, we've got some ways to draw a ton of cards at once with Collective Unconscious, Shamanic Revelation, and Camaraderie. Each are going to draw us a card for each creature that we control. If we happen to have any creatures with 4 or more power, Shamanic Revelation can gain us life. And then Camaraderie gains us X life for X the number of creatures we control, and our creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. So the more creatures that we have on the board, the more effective these cards become. But in order for them to be truly effective, we need to keep our creatures on the board. So let's go over some ways to do that in tactic number 8, Resilient Roots. First up, there's Swiftfoot Boots, which gives one of our creatures Hexproof and Haste. So not only can this protect one of our creatures, but it can also help us swing out of nowhere with them. Next up, there's a very flexible card with Golgari Charm. It says choose 1. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn, destroy target enchantment, or regenerate each creature you control. And protecting our team for just 2 mana is a huge deal. And then we're running another great way to protect our team with Ready and Willing. Ready says, creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn, untap each creature you control. And Willing says, creatures you control gain Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. So this card can really turn the tides in a lot of situations. Another card that can be really effective in this deck though is Culfiner's Urn. It says whenever a creature with toughness 4 or greater is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may exile it. At the beginning of your end step, if 3 or more cards have been exiled with Culfiner's Urn, sacrifice it. If you do, return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. So it's a fantastic way to get back some of our best creatures for a very low investment. Now we've talked about protecting our things, but what about dealing with our opponents? So let's go through some ways to do that in tactic number 9, Cut Down. First up, there's D-Spark, which is going to exile target permanent with converted mana cost of 4 or greater. And then there's Utter End, which has no such restriction, it's just going to exile target non-land permanent. And then Oblation's going to make the owner of target non-land permanent shuffle into their library and draw 2 cards. So if we're desperate, we can actually just use this on one of our own permanents to draw 2 cards too. And then we've got some Wraths with Dusk to Dawn and Solar Tide. Each are going to destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. And then Dawn is going to return all creature cards with power 2 or less from our graveyard to our hand. So for the most part, these are going to be one-sided board wipes in this deck. Another one-sided board wipe comes with Wave of Reckoning. It says each creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. Again, nearly all of our creatures have a greater toughness than their power. So while they're going to survive this, most of our opponent's creatures won't. This is definitely a deck though that revolves heavily around its commander. So we need to make sure that we have a backup plan if our commander gets dealt with too many times. So it's time for us to move on to our final tactic, tactic number 10, Doran Jr. And the first card in this tactic is actually the Golden Pig of this deck. The Golden Pig is going to be our number 1 card out of our 99. The Golden Pig for this deck is Assault Formation. It's an enchantment for 1 and a green, and it says each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. For a green, target creature with Defender can attack this turn as though it didn't have Defender. And for a 2 and a green, creatures you control get +0/+1 until end of turn. So this basically is a second copy of our commander, but it's harder for our opponents to deal with, and it's cheaper. On top of that, we can use it to pump our team, and it can help our defenders attack. Keep in mind though that unlike Doran, this only affects our creatures. It's a very valuable card in this deck, and we're going to be happy whenever we have it in play. But we've also got another one of these effects with Watley the Sun's Heart. It's a Planeswalker that starts off with 7 loyalty, and it says each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. It's -3 as you gain life equal to the greatest toughness among creatures you control. And finally, the last of these effects comes with Belligerent Brontodon. Now, it might seem like overkill to have 3 of these extra effects in this deck, but without this effect, we're just going to have a bunch of tough creatures that don't really do much. But when that effect's in play, we're going to have the most threatening creatures out there. This deck was a ton of fun to build, and again, a big thank you to Johnson for supporting this channel for over a year now as a general tier patron. If you also want to support this show or want your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you, consider becoming a patron. But now that we've gone through the spells in this deck, let's go on to the mana base. First up, we've got Command Tower, which can tap for any of our colors, and Exotic Orchard can tap for any of our colors most of the time. And then there's Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, both of which we can tap to sacrifice to search our library for basic land and put into play tapped. Up next, we've got 5 lands, which each enter the battlefield tapped and tap for either green or white mana. And then we've got 3 lands that each enter the battlefield tapped and tap for either black or green mana. Up next, there's Sandstep Citadel, which enters the battlefield tapped and taps for any of our colors. And then we're running the 3 Vivid lands with Vivid Grove, Vivid Meadow, and Vivid Marsh. Finally, we're running 20 basic lands, 10 of those are going to be a forest, 8 will be a plains, and 2 will be swamps. And now that we've gone through every single card in this deck, let's do a quick price check. A quick reminder that our deck costs are calculated using TCGplayer optimization, optimizing with even heavily played and damaged cards because those cards need a home too. The average Doran EDH rec deck will set you back $167.43. Our deck is going to be much more affordable, coming in at $49.42. Again, the price of this deck is the price that I got for it on the day that I'm recording. If you want to see a breakdown of this deck's cost, check out the link in the description. Keep in mind that prices can and will fluctuate and change over time. But with these deck costs, I want to be as transparent as I possibly can. Again, Commander's Quarters decks are built to be tuned and focused within their budget, but there are always ways that we can improve on them. So let's go through some reasonable upgrades now to see what some of those ways just might be. First up, let's add in Tree of Perdition by taking out Rotting Mastodon. And then let's add in Sapling of Kolphinor by taking out Jotty Lifestrider. Next up, we're putting in Sidor Kondo of Jamora by taking out Belligerent Brontodon. And then we're putting in Fel the Mighty by taking out Solar Tide. Up next, let's add in Meekstone by taking out Verdant Sun's Avatar. And finally, we're adding in Crackdown and taking out Trostani Selesnya's Voice. And now it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what you think about this deck and what you think about the commander in general. And make sure that you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Links to our social media accounts can be found in the description. Also in the description below is a link to the Commander's Quarters Patreon page, and I just want to say a quick thank you to the patrons who have subscribed so far. There are many benefits to being a patron for the Commander's Quarters, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There's even a general level tier where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. I truly couldn't do this without all of your support, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.